Potions class. We are here today wrapping up our series on SARS-CoV-2, the new novel coronavirus based out of Wuhan. I'm here with the crew. I'm here with Eric from the outside line.
Hey, what's
up, Eric? I'm here with Joe.
Hi,
Joe?
Good. How's everybody doing? Good? It's been a week.
Yeah.
I want to thank everybody for the awesome support that we got on the launch of the show. It's super, super cool. And we're doing really,
honestly,
really well.
Thank you all so much for all of the support, all the kind words, and all of
the reviews and the ratings.
I mean, it's been
doing very well.
I think we've been pretty surprised just how willing everyone was to kind of take this information, run with it, and we're super excited to not only wrap up this series, but bring you guys a lot of interesting stuff in the future that I think is going to be pretty relevant, and I'm really excited with how the show's going to go. So today we got a special guest, Mitch Cooney. How you doing today, Mitch?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Mitch is an analyst at Green Springs Associate, where he is responsible for performing due diligence for both fund and startup investments. Previously, Mitchell interned at Green Spring Associates and at Paladin Capital Group, an early-stage venture firm. Mitch graduated from the Robert H. Smith School of Business at the University of Maryland with a Bachelor of Science in Finance and Information Systems. Mitchell, we're super stoked to have you on the show today.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me again. Excited to talk about coronavirus and some of the impacts there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're hoping we're going to touch on a bunch of different topics today, but we're hoping to give you a good insight to how the economics are being affected, not only in this country, but kind of around the world with this coronavirus. I mean, there's a lot of implications that arise not only in health concerns, but as we're moving forward and as this disease progresses, there's a lot of cultural, a lot of economic, and a lot of international affairs issues that kind of arise out of this type of worldwide crisis, international crisis. So we're super excited to have you on the show, Mitch. I just want to put a disclaimer real quick. I do work for the NIH, but all these opinions are research that has been done on my own time. These are not reflective of the NIH's standpoints in general or the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. These are my own opinions, my own research. So just getting that disclaimer out of the way real quick. So before we get started, let's do a quick little update. As of last time that we've talked, we've had some stuff progress. Total infection numbers now are at 110,034. As of tonight. Tonight is Sunday, March 8th. The deaths are now sitting at 3,825, and the recoveries are at 61,965. So we're seeing a lot of those recoveries seem to spike, which is, obviously going to be a good thing. If you look at we brought it up a couple times, but the Johns Hopkins dashboard.
I thought the deaths was higher. Was I wrong?
Well, there was a big spike today in particular in Italy. They had over 100 deaths.
Oh, yeah. I saw something about Italy blew up today or something.
Yeah. Today was not a great day for Italy. They had over 100 deaths, and they're going to be quarantining, I think, around 16 million people.
Yikers.
Yes.
So,
That's not good.
That's going to have just huge implications, not only to...
Italy's the most affected place now, right?
No, China's still...
I thought I saw something that said they were the most infected.
Italy's... I don't even think that they're the most... They might be the most outside of China. It's either Italy.
Yeah, I guess Wuhan was...
Well, yeah. Well, China's...
Yeah, it was the epicenter, so that's probably why you saw.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting, though, that the fact that it's Italy, because we'll probably have more of a read on how the hospital system reacts and stuff of that nature compared to China. It seems like we'll probably get information a little bit quicker from there.
Well, what's really interesting is when you look at global efforts in order to stem the progression of the virus, different countries just have different levels of response. And it has a lot to do not only with how new the exposure is, but it also has to do with the type of government. So when you look at a government like China, they just being the type of government that they can take a lot of drastic measures that we're not going to see a lot in more democratic nations, particularly in Europe and then the U.S. But Italy is now at 7,375 infections, so they're about 10 behind South Korea. So they've had a huge spike over the past 24 hours. So our thoughts going out to everyone in Italy.
Yeah.
We know.
Eric, do you know anyone in Italy?
The Pope.
That's true. Pope's like dying, isn't he? Or that turned out not to be coronavirus.
No, he does not have the coronavirus. He has a bad flu, but he's like missing a part of his lung from some disease.
Yeah, and he tweeted. He was like, "You'll all miss me," or something.
He says, "Remember me in your prayers."
Yeah, remember me.
I'm like, "Oh, Francis."
Yeah, everyone was like, "Oh." He also like slapped a woman the week before, so it's kind of bad karma for him, I guess.
That wasn't the week before. That was a couple months ago.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think it was like 2-3 weeks before he didn't announce he was sick.
He didn't even like slap her. He slapped her like how a cat hits you, where it's like
he like hit her hand.
It was a couple
I mean,
swats.
He slapped as hard as a pope can slap. He's like 108.
So yeah, we've had, I think since the last episode, we've had some things happen closer to home. So we're based out of Maryland, and in Montgomery County, we had three infections occur, and then in DC yesterday they had 2 infections occur that were a result of community spread. So, it's a little concerning. Obviously, as we've talked about in the past, it's not really a surprise. We've kind of suspected that this has been circulating, and these cases of community spread aren't isolated to Washington or California or just the West Coast in general. I mean, as we saw cases popping up in New York, just due to East Coast economy, it's not hard to speculate that there's just been a lot of travel up and down the East Coast, and as a result, due to the high infection rate, that stuff is just going to be spreading. So I think I've seen a couple of different reports, but be looking over the next week and not being alarmed, but definitely be looking for a huge upswing in cases as these tests continue to roll out and as we keep getting more. There was also that case of community spread, and one of the individuals went to the
some conference.
Yeah, the Republican conference over in D.C. Mike Pence, his hand was not shook by one of the infected.
Conspiracy theories.
Yes.
Was Mike Pence the starter of coronavirus?
Maybe.
Well, one of the funnier things is seeing people now without the handshake. Like I was watching the Duke and UNC basketball game, and the 2 coaches did like this weird like shoulder bump.
Oh.
So that's kind of crazy. Instead, that's going to be like the new norm.
Dude, and apparently March Madness potentially will be played without fans. Did you see that?
Yeah, I heard that about the NBA, but in Italy right now, going back to Italy, it looks like Series A football will be without fans for a little bit.
That's crazy. That'd be so wild. Like weird.
Can you imagine like
an empty stadium
to an empty stadium? It's just like you.
Yeah. You're seeing that across, like I'm pretty sure we'll fact check this, but South by Southwest I think was canceled.
South by Southwest was canceled, and that has a lot of implications.
Wasn't Firefly canceled?
Oh no,
I think Fireflies is like about to be canceled.
Well, Pennsylvania has some stuff updating, but like the South by Southwest thing, I know that has a ton of implications for just the economy down there, because like there's so much influx.
One of the biggest indicators, we'll get to this later, but just consumer spending, and I guess the more where these entertainment, social events, people just start dining in, it really could have some resounding effect on the economy from that standpoint. So
no, absolutely.
Yeah, it's another moniker to look at.
Well, I mean, kind of on that note, Mitch, we're having you on the show so you can give us a little bit more of an insight to kind of the economic implications of this coronavirus. So do you want to give us kind of the rundown on what you're seeing on your end, things that you've heard, things that you've looked into? What can people expect to see as we're moving forward? Like what does this event look like kind of in the grand scheme of global events that have happened over the past, I mean, for us 25 years, but then our other listeners maybe the past 50 years, what does this coronavirus look like on a international scale economically?
So before hopping in that question, just want to put a disclaimer out there that everything I say is my own opinion or stuff that I researched on my own time. Nothing is affiliated with Greenspring Associates. Yeah, no, great question. So I think one of the first places people look when a big outbreak like this happens is the stock market. So just some high level points on that. But so the stock market for the past 10 years, we've been riding this super bullish market, meaning the top stocks have been appreciating, companies have been receiving massive valuations, and pretty much if you invested a couple dollars here or there, you've been reaping some pretty solid benefits from that. So the other day, the stock market was at an all-time high. And then this past Friday, it actually dropped down more than 12%, marking the biggest drop since just in recent memory. So whenever there's a massive drop like this, people just speculate, could this be the end of the bull market we've been seeing? Is this the cause of maybe the next recession? Looking at events like this, there's kind of a name people pin on them, and that's the Black Swan. So a couple publications talked about this. There's a famous memo, it will be famous, by Sequoia, and they just coined it being, it's a random event that happens, but it can have resounding impacts on the economy. So by meaning Black Swan, it's kind of just an event that came by major surprise, and we'll just see kind of where it trickles. So basically, the last Black Swan event people look at is the 9/11 attacks. And after 9/11, the market actually fell around 7.1%. And it kind of led on to a bad trend for a little bit of the stock market depreciating in value. So that's usually where people look to start, is the stock market. So you can see that there has been decline. Most of it is fear-based, but it kind of potentially could lead to like bigger economic downswing. So it's just something to watch. And there is like a myriad of opinions on whether people think is the start of a big downswing, or there could just be a small market correction. So.
Yeah. And so you said that these Black Swan events, are those typically considered to be fear-based events, or are they considered to be actually devastating to the stock market? Like, for example, does an event like 9/11 or does an event like the coronavirus, does it actually necessitate a drop, or is that drop as a result of people just overreacting to whatever is going on in the case of Black Swan events?
Yeah, it's definitely a reaction. It's not necessarily negative, but it's just an event that kind of comes by surprise and it has resounding impact. So as I said before, for the past 10 or so years, we've been seeing companies valued at ridiculous rates, ridiculous values. And in terms of them actually producing cash or having a substantial amount of customers, this could be an event that is a slight downswing, but could topple the market. Just at a high sense, like in the reality, a lot of people also think that it could be a small market correction, just a lot of fear-based investors trying to cash out, and it could be just a blip, and we could continue our bull market run up. So there really is like rhetoric on both sides.
That makes a lot of sense. So like to our listeners, including myself, who just may be unfamiliar with how the stock market functions necessarily, and when we hear things like, oh, there's a stock market crash, it's hard to make that tangible if we don't understand how the stock market works. So like, how would you say from a high level the stock market functions, and how does an event like this lead to a crash?
Yeah, so the stock market is pretty much, it's a collection of market and exchanges where people can buy and sell. So meaning, in layman's terms, Apple is a publicly listed company. You or I, we can buy and sell that. So there's investors that hold a lot of it and some that hold a little bit. So in a case like this, you can see that when I say the stock market drops 12%, the S&P, for instance, is an index. So it's tracking some of the top companies such as Apple, Microsoft. When you see it drop, it means a lot of people are selling their stakes in that pretty quickly.
And so when you refer to the stock market in the past being a bullish run, what does that mean?
Yeah, so bullish means that it's been appreciating in value. So if you look at it like at a high level, the stock market is full of a bunch of these exchanges, as I said before. So some of the more notable ones are like the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ, which are places where a bunch of these public companies can list. There's also these indexes that I was talking about, such as the S&P, where essentially it tracks the performance of a bunch of these stocks in aggregate. Another big one's the Dow Jones. So when I say it's been a bullish run, it means investors have been buying a lot. It's been pumping up the stock price. So that's what we're talking about when we see bullish, that it has been like appreciating in value. So these companies, as we've seen recently in the case of like Microsoft, Amazon, they've reached like valuations of $1 trillion. So if you look 10, 20 years ago, those companies were worth not nearly as equivalent then.
Kind of to come back on a point you said earlier. So pretty much on this bullish run, there's always a lot of people that think that like any day it's just going to crash really hard and everything's just going to be back in another recession or just be like terrible again. And so you were saying that potentially like coronavirus, there are people out there that think coronavirus could potentially be that, but then there's other people that are kind of just thinking that maybe it's just a little bit of a correction and it'll keep going up. Is that what you're saying?
I think at a high level, if you look at economics, they say it's cyclical. So meaning every 10 or so years, 10 to 15 years, you'll see these small recessions. But if you look at it from the long view, it's been appreciating in value since inception.
Right.
So you do see corrections like this and it drops, but most investors are long-term, meaning they hold on to stuff for a long time. So I would say a majority think this could just be a small correction and just a blip in the radar. The economy, it's based on people. So people are fear-based. So if something like this happens, you see a lot of people liquidate pretty quickly. So it could be a small correction, but some people think it could be maybe a start or potentially like a catalyst for a serious drop. But that would be due to other reasons, as I was talking about before, such as hyperinflated valuations or et cetera, et cetera.
That makes a lot of sense. So, I mean, obviously there's an argument and a concern that a lot of these kind of drastic drops could be fear-based, but obviously when something like a coronavirus outbreak happens or some sort of pandemic or just some international tragedy, like there are short and long-term effects. So what would you say, in your opinion, would be some of the short-term effects that we can see as a result of kind of the public response to the coronavirus outbreak?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. One thing we touched on before was in a situation like this, you'll see consumer spending down. So a lot of companies, whether public or private, could be in a bit of a pinch in terms of selling products. So especially companies that are in the dining, entertainment, maybe more consumer oriented, they could face like a short-term hit. And if coronavirus is something potentially larger than this, then they could take a serious drop. So I guess that's one indicator right there. Another indicator is just how China is having such a hard time with coronavirus. China is such a massive part of the global supply chain. Supply chain meaning they're a massive distributor of goods. They're also a massive producer of goods as well. So
everything's made in China these days.
Literally everything is made in China.
Yeah. So when you see someone like China being the epicenter of the coronavirus, it really could stop like a lot of the free trade we see over there. So a lot of companies are based or that they have certain products that come from that area. So it could hurt them in that sense as well.
Mm-hmm. And so even though this is a sort of, in a lot of ways, fear-based, like you were saying, I mean, people are fear-based. We react based on our emotions and we react based on what we see going on around us, and not having a clear understanding of the implications of some sort of international worldwide tragedy like the coronavirus can obviously lead to some sort of impact. So would you say that this impact is here to stay? Do you think that it's going to bounce back quickly, or is this just the type of thing that time's going to tell and we don't really have a clear grasp?
Yeah, from just some high level stuff I read, and I'll attach some like show notes below on various opinions, but people think this could be a quarter or two, meaning from this point to maybe the next like 3 to 6 months. And in terms of where that brings the stock market or actually affects companies, it could have some pretty resounding effects. So I think it is worth noting that the drop probably continues to happen, but in terms for how long, it really is up in the air. I mean, similar to how they think they're going to contain the virus, they're pretty linked. So,
and question to that, for everyday listeners, people like us, pretty much, like, should we be worried, or is it going to be okay for us, as opposed to like, you know?
No, the best advice I can give you is actually what Marshawn Lynch gave in one of his press conferences when he got out of the NFL, and he said, "Take care of your chickens." So,
oh, true.
I think for yourself, if you just continue to invest, you'll be fine. It really, I believe it's a blip. We'll see. Time will tell. Just continue to be smart, make money. You'll be okay.
Yeah. So obviously, there are drastic differences between how this is going to affect the economy in China and then the economy here in the U.S. But since there's just so much international trade and these stock markets are so internationally involved at this point, do you think that China is looking at a longer road to recovery? And how do you think that that might impact the U.S. in the long term?
Yeah, I think this is pure speculation, but as you noted before, the United States, China, they're intrinsically linked. The market now, it's global in nature, meaning everything is impactful. So as soon as we saw this trickle down in China, it instantly impacted us. But it really does seem like over time, as we mentioned before, everything will be okay. China just being like a communist regime, you probably see quick movement, as you noted before. Like just politically, they can probably handle this stuff different than we would. So it really is time will tell to kind of see how this impacts the United States. But we'll probably see similar things in terms of supply chain economics hurting, transfer of goods, consumer spending being down. So we'll probably see similar trends that they're experiencing as well.
Is there potential that this type of event could actually be a plus for the United States? So when we see a country like China, who, yeah, we do owe a lot of money and there's a lot of trade invested there and there is some competition in that regard on the global market. When we see China take a hit, is that potentially a plus for the U.S.? Is that bad all around because the market's so global at this point?
Good question. But again, at pure speculation, I just see the market being we're so linked to China in many ways that resounding effects in one area really hurt the other. Mm-hmm. So as a whole, we really grow together and we shrink together. So I think it would affect maybe like particular companies and like, for instance, what you're saying, like Johnson & Johnson, I'm sure they'll appreciate and value if their supply chain's okay, but it really depends. We'll probably see how it plays out, but it is so like internationally linked at this point that it will probably hurt us for a little bit.
Yeah, and that was kind of the heart of my question is the market so global at this point where it is we rise and fall together, and while there might be competition, it really is a global effort to be prosperous at this point.
Yeah, I mean, as you guys know before, you joked about everything being made in China, but that's true about everyone.
It's kind of true,
so
yeah.
There's customers everywhere. It really is linked, so we really do rise and fall together. I'd probably say that at a high level, but we'll see.
So when we're looking at companies in China in particular right now, and I don't know if you have a lot of information on this, but if you have any insight, it could be interesting. Looking at the public response to the outbreak, whether people think that it's necessary, whether they think that it's not. I know a lot of people, from what I've been seeing, have been like, oh, don't freak out so much. It's just like a really bad cold. And yes, like 2% of people die, but a lot of more people die from the flu on a yearly basis, and we don't freak out about it. The realistic outcome that we're seeing is a lot of business closing in China and a lot of companies that we see over here in America that are started in America, even over in China. Like I know McDonald's had
the McDonald's and Starbucks actually just reopened.
Oh, they did?
Mm-hmm. Oh. Yeah. They announced it in the press conference. Trump did. They announced that they reopened.
Who?
Starbucks did. I don't know about the McDonald's, but Starbucks reopened.
Well, Trump will make sure that McDonald's.
But they work.
He needs his hamburgers.
Yeah, he needs his hamburgers. But for a while they were closed, and who knows, we might see more. So your point still stands.
Yeah, and I mean, not just in China, and especially in countries, this kind of goes into something that maybe you might not have as much insight into. So if not, feel free to, just be like, I'm not sure, it's all speculation. But as we're seeing the disease spread to other countries and other countries that we do a lot of business with, that don't necessarily have this regime that China does, and they can't necessarily roll out these heavy-duty responses because these countries are more democratic in nature. Do you think that we're going to see slower bounce back from these types of countries as opposed to a country like China that can kind of just have their government step in and be like, this is what we're doing? When it's left up to a democratic vote or when the people have more of a say and it is more fear-based, does that have a negative impact on businesses, on people not going to work for longer periods of time? And how does that affect the global market? Or how would you speculate that it might?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, I guess the gist of that is it really what you're asking is what political regime, like between at a high level like capitalism and communism, which is more conducive to a market bounce back?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a much better way of phrasing the question.
Yeah, no, I think as we've seen before, like China has taken some aggressive measures to already curtail the virus spread. So just grabbing one data point here, I'll attach a link below, but it was quoted that data such as daily coal consumption and passenger traffic remain far below your earlier levels. And there's been some pickup in businesses already in the area. It really, and this has disrupted a global supply chain. The U.S. economy is getting hurt as a result. So it really depends. Like speculation, somewhere like China, we probably could see quicker bounce back just due to the fact that they can command like a little bit of like how businesses and people will react. But as we said before, we really haven't seen a lot of like precedented cases like this. So it is kind of a black swan, just some unexpected event that's going to have pretty resounding effects. So time will tell.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, it was kind of more of I assumed that it would be a speculative question, but I was just wondering if maybe you would have any insight to how these different sort of governments can play a role in bounce back from an event like this. A final question I kind of had in regards to this, and if you guys have any other questions, feel free to spout them out. But when we're looking at these travel bans, and we're looking at the sort of drop in the ability to physically be in a country, since we live in such a time of technological advance, and since we live in such a time where so much of interaction happens digitally, do you think that the impacts of these travel bans are going to be negligible to a degree, or do you think that these travel bans are going to have a severe impact on economic bounce back and just the state of the global economy as a whole?
That's a great point there. As we said before, like it really is linked. So many companies have already started banning all non-essential travel, and some have banned international travel. It's probably most directly impacted like relationships between these companies. It probably hurts smaller markets more than large because, for instance, if you're stuck in New York City and you can't travel anywhere, you'll have to eat, buy goods from there. So you'll probably see a little bit more of like mass market cities maybe appreciate in value a little bit or reap some benefits there. Could hurt some smaller countries, but we'll kind of see how it plays out.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. So as we're kind of wrapping up this section on the economic impacts, there's obviously a lot of people who are very invested and a lot of people who have strong opinions. So are there any particular people who have been outspoken about the coronavirus in general in regards to the economy, and kind of what are some of their thoughts?
Elon Musk says the coronavirus is dumb.
No, he tweeted that, and like everything he tweets just like inspires a lot of tweet storms. So
he's a little bit of a meme lord now.
He's got a lot of. Didn't he just put out another song?
I don't know. He put out a song like a month ago.
No, yeah, there was the Harambe one like a couple years ago.
Yeah, no, he put one out recently.
Yeah.
No, but that's a great point there. Like these people carry a lot of weight, and just being a fear-based economy, it's just a simple tweet like that kind of faces some issues.
That's a good point. I never really thought about that.
So do you think that when Elon Musk gets on Twitter and he says something like the coronavirus panic is dumb, do you think that
it's got more of a meaning than just to incite rage?
Yeah,
it's actually to incite peace
in ways. But do you think that type of thing causes more controversy and causes more panic through disagreement? And because people just are so in disagreement, and this is more of just a discussion question than it is like you having a direct answer.
Yeah.
But like personally, when you see someone like Elon Musk tweet out something like the coronavirus panic is dumb, obviously that's going to have a pretty strong impact, and it's going to tread on a lot of people's fears, especially if they might not like Elon Musk. They might not really know who he is, but he carries a lot of weight. And when it gets a lot of publicity, people kind of jump to like, well, what do you know? Like, why do you think that you have the right to say that it's dumb? And do you think that has a positive impact as a whole, or does it kind of just spark a debate that can lead to good conversation in regards to topics like this?
Yeah, no, I think it's kind of a two-sided sword there in terms of he's putting out an opinion. but he didn't really follow up on it. So just spreading a statement like that, I think, is actually probably not the best way to go about it. It'd be great to see him, like hear him on like maybe a longer winded podcast, or even go down like a storm kind of defending his hypothesis there, because
rumors are he'll be on this podcast within the week.
Yeah, he hasn't really gotten back to us.
No, but I definitely think like that's one of the funny things about Twitter is you can put out a statement, and if you have like a cult-like following, and someone like Elon Musk is definitely an incredibly smart and gifted individual, it can have some resounding effects. So probably a net negative in terms of tweeting that, but maybe he's trying to protect, like, I don't have too much info on like how Tesla stock fared after that, but he's had cases before in the past where, for instance, he tweeted out funding secured, meaning he was going to potentially bring.
Yeah, I remember that. That was crazy.
He was like, "Nah, you can't do that."
So wait, he just tweeted funding secured, but like nothing had happened. Like he just tweeted it.
Yeah, I'm sure he had some internal stuff going on there, but he's done a couple things like this in the past, but people respond to it. So
yeah, didn't he also tweet like, "I'm going private at a certain amount of money, like per stock or something," and then they reached that, and then he didn't go private?
Yeah, so that was before. Like, as soon as we get to that value, we're going private, which would probably boost it. Like the owners of the stock would most likely receive like a nice bump in value and get. So it could have been like just hey, buy my stock because you're going to get some instant cash flow from this. But I think high level, you got to be careful. Don't base your thoughts on Twitter, on Elon Musk tweets, but I guess think about it at like a high level. How far do you think this thing's going to go? Maybe it's not best to have all your money tied up in high tech, hyper growth stocks, but just really diversified portfolio. Be careful and don't follow based on Twitter, and you should be okay.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, don't just follow tweets, everybody. Listen to us instead.
Yeah, listen to podcasts, not to tweets.
Yeah, Potions class Twitter only.
Yeah, Potions class is the only place you should be getting your information for the next 3 months until this passes over.
I mean, this has been, for me personally, super educational. I mean, this is just the type of thing that I don't have a lot of insight to. So
yeah, this has been super cool.
Super great to have you on, just kind of like giving us a fresh perspective, and kind of like we've been focusing so much on kind of just the biological basis, but like this has real implications for people and for economies. And so it's super interesting to kind of get a perspective on that. We're going to wrap up this section real quick before we kind of go on. Is there anything that you kind of want to say in conclusion? We can.
Yeah. In summary, what would you think that people should like worry about / care about when it comes to the economy and coronavirus, and kind of people like us, like your everyday American person? What should they worry about / pay attention to?
Yeah, well, first off, I would say thanks for having me on the show. It's been great hearing from you guys, and I've just been following this at a high level from your guys' perspective. So it's been great kind of just dumbing down in a little bit what coronavirus is. So that's been impactful and definitely helps like reduce some of the fears surrounding it. From an economic standpoint, I'd just say keep watching some of these key market indicators in terms of how China's reacting, because we're so interconnected with them. Other things such as what's going on? Are they shutting down events? Are people dining in? Just little things like this showing our consumer spending that could have some impact in terms of like how the economy responds. Another big thing, another trend we touched on was international, just travel, in terms of like shutting down that global connectedness. So those are a couple like easy market indicators we can watch and maybe inform some of our decision making. I'd say at a high level, don't be freaked out. Corrections happen. This could be something maybe a little more resounding, but over the long run, we've seen the market continue to appreciate. So keep your money invested and just continue to read and be vigilant about it.
Awesome. All right. Well, Mitchell, thank you so much for coming on. Like, I feel like I have learned so much, even just the past 40 minutes of talking with you.
It's been great, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, dude. And we will have we'll have Mitchell's LinkedIn link in the bio if you want to ask him any questions. He's the expert of our friends that knows the economy.
AKA not much of an expert,
but enough. You brought a bunch of solid info, dude. I learned a lot. But yeah, if you guys want to get in touch with Mitchell, feel free, and we'll have all of your links to kind of all your research that you found in the bio as well of this episode.
Definitely. Thank you, guys.
So as we've been looking at the news, obviously there's a lot of stuff coming out, and I think as Mitchell was talking about earlier, there's a lot of fear that's kind of built around misinformation. And I feel like, at least I personally have seen a lot of misinformation just being spread on things like Facebook, things like Twitter. And so a couple things that I wanted to bring up, and then if you guys had anything that you had seen in the news that people have been sharing a lot about, we're just going to briefly touch on these. First of all, don't worry too much about your pets getting the coronavirus. I've seen a lot of people kind of freaking out about, there was a study that came out where there was a dog that was tested and it had a minor level of infection. They weren't 100% sure whether or not it was just some trace virus that was on the dog or if the dog was actually infected, but the dog wasn't showing any deleterious effects. There's no
So
evidence.
don't worry about your animals having it. Is pretty much what you're saying.
Yeah, don't freak out about that. Don't do what they were doing in China and
they were like
throw your
hucking their cats off
and
the
dogs
roofs.
off the porch.
It's ridiculous.
Don't be getting rid of your animals. I mean, there's not any evidence that they're capable of getting it and spreading it to you. So that would be another one. Another thing, I saw some sort of Facebook meme that was making its way around that the CDC is telling everyone that they have to shave their beards and shave their
what?
facial hair.
Yeah.
What was that one? Did you see that?
A customer at my job said that to me.
Really?
And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but okay.
It's not true. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and I would highly recommend that anything that you see that seems to be extreme or a little bit crazy. Another one that I saw was the SARS-CoV-2 is just like a combination of the original SARS and AIDS.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Whoa.
It's not. There's no
super
papers
AIDS.
linked to that. Like anytime that you're seeing information that seems extreme and it seems almost like some sort of propaganda, be sure to read into that. And also, don't be racist. Don't beat up people of Asian descent just because.
Yeah. Or don't
Yeah.
hide from them.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't be racist.
In closing, Elliot, coronavirus, we pretty much
tackled it.
ripped it apart.
ripped it to shreds.
We've looked at every tiny bit.
We've ripped
A new
our
one.
shreds. We've ripped coronavirus into finer shreds than it will rip our lungs.
So anyways, what should people, just like I asked Mitchell, I'd ask you this too. What should people kind of like us, average American, people, what should we worry about? What should we do if people around us get coronavirus? Because it seems like, it's getting to the point where everyone's potentially going to be affected by it in some way or another, but it might not affect some as bad as others.
Yeah.
So what should people worry about or care about day to day?
In order to answer that question, I think it's generally important that we sort of have a overarching understanding on how our immune system works. So we're just going to briefly touch on that. So your immune system, you typically have two different major responses. You have an innate immune response, and then you're going to have an adaptive immune response. And what we're going to really be focusing on when we're trying to take these preventive measures is the innate immune response, because your adaptive immune response, that's going to be things like vaccines. That's going to be more of an antibody response. When we look at the innate immune response, we're looking at things more like our skin and basic things that we can do day to day in order to protect ourselves and to protect others. So the quickest way to understand it is that your innate immune response can be easily compared to a sudden assault on a castle's walls. It's like, I think the quickest way and the easiest way to understand it. So think of it as a sudden attack on a castle, and your immune system, your innate immune response takes on the form of a castle. The response is rapid. It happens within about 0 to 4 hours. So 0 to 4 hours upon being contaminated with the virus, you're going to have this innate immune response. It's going to continue to go on. It's going to be nonspecific. Nonspecific meaning there's no memory related. So when you get a vaccine that has some sort of memory, your body can have a secondary response at a later time. The innate immune response can be broken into two primary categories: your anatomical barriers and internal responses. So anatomical barriers are going to be things like your stomach acid, which breaks down things that get into your stomach. It's going to be like your skin, which is the number one, I would say, and I think a lot of people would say, innate immune response that we need to be aware. Your skin saves you from so many things. Every single day, the insides of our bodies are vulnerable and they're constantly at risk of being infected. But our skin provides an amazing barrier. It's like a castle wall.
Which is why you should use hand sanitizer, people.
Yes, be using hand sanitizer.
Wash hands.
Washing your hands for at least 20 seconds.
Happy birthday twice.
Happy birthday twice.
I always heard it once.
No, it's twice.
Oh.
You're
20 seconds.
You're doing it half as long as you should be, Eric.
You're going to get coronavirus.
That's why I use hand sanitizer.
Yeah. So these anatomical barriers are going to be like really important to making sure that you're keeping yourself and other people healthy. So when you're going about and you're out in public, just be sure to be washing your hands, being aware that you cough into your arm. There's not necessarily any reason to think that if you are healthy and you do not have underlying conditions, that the coronavirus is going to be something that you need to be incredibly afraid of. But the reality is that there are a lot of people out there that do need to be more concerned. And it is our job as active citizens to take this seriously. So when we talk about not having a fear mentality in regards to this COVID-19 outbreak, it doesn't necessarily mean, and it shouldn't mean, that we're not being responsible and that we're not considering that there are plenty of people within our community that are at risk for this being a serious thing. So be sure to be aware. If you feel sick, do not go to work. Do not take public transportation. Be sure to wash your hands, self-quarantine. But the reality is, for a lot of people, this is going to come and go. So if you can stay at home and self-quarantine, don't be taking up the hospital's time if you don't have to. Get tested, make sure that you're aware, make sure that you're communicating, but don't be taking up hospital resources. Don't be flooding hospitals and causing a lot of problem because, one, there's a lot of people that are going to need help. And if hospitals are swamped with a fear-based reaction to something that's not that serious for a lot of people, then it's going to limit the resources that those hospitals have. On top of that, the reality is that we still have a lot of viruses that are floating around that aren't the coronavirus, and people are still going to be dealing with the flu and dealing with regular colds. And so it's important that we recognize that, and every time that we hear someone sneeze or cough, we're not going into a panic. This will come and go. It is serious, but it is not something that we need to be drastically afraid of. And so I would encourage everyone to keep calm and wash your hands.
I wash my hands every day. Every time I go to the bathroom.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
No, every time.
You better be. You're the scientist here. I hope you are.
I use hand sanitizer every hour, probably.
Really?
Every hour? Yeah. Do you have a bottle?
Are you
of Purell
hogging
like
it from us?
I didn't even know we had anything.
No, at work.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Well, yeah, you work at a mall, so you should.
Yeah.
That's probably a good idea.
No, I have a stash of Purell in my room. It's got $800 on it.
Don't be stashing. Okay, yeah, this is another thing that I just need to get out there because I see it happening everywhere. Do not go to your local supermarket and hog all the toilet paper. I don't know why this is happening, but I've seen it. It's
so dumb.
You don't need that much toilet paper. You're not going to be self-quarantined for like 6 months.
It's the apocalypse. People
are stockpiling so
funny.
much toilet paper. It is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, it's really
use
stupid.
it as tissues too.
I saw this one dude posted a picture. He went and stockpiled so much toilet paper, he made a throne out of it, and he was just sitting in it.
Yeah, that's dumb.
Don't do that because, we all need to...
I need some too.
We all need to take a shit every once in a while, and I don't want to have to walk over to the Harris Teeter and have no toilet paper because some people are...
Because Brian took it all. We're looking at you, Brian.
Yeah, Brian. And while we're talking about another myth, also Purell does not cost $70 on
No, it does
Amazon.
not.
I thought that it did too because I did not look into it. But if you can, it's not
Still like
There's a lot of
$18.
misinformation
It's
out there.
normal.
There's a lot of people freaking out. It's again something that we should be serious about. And as we're wrapping up this series on coronavirus, I really don't want people to come away with it with a perspective of fear, but just a perspective of being vigilant. Let's be good citizens and let's make sure that we're taking care of everyone in our society. So
Cool.
all right, well, thank you all so much for listening to Potions Class. This has been our series on SARS-CoV-2. Starting next week, we're going to be tackling some more interesting topics. We're going to be doing a series on caffeine.
Cool.
So we're really excited to get into that. There's a lot of interesting research out there, and I'm really excited to share my findings on this.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear them.
Yeah. And if you liked what you heard today, be sure to go to podcastbyjoe.com. Thank you so much for listening to Potions Class, and we'll see you next week.